The clock had just crept past 3 in the morning on March 4th, 2022, when the stillness of Kamas, Utah, was interrupted by a desperate phone call. A woman's voice came through the emergency line, fragmented, breathless, barely coherent. She said her husband wasn't breathing. Dispatchers wasted no time. Paramedics were immediately sent racing toward 282 Willow Court, a large home sitting quietly on the edge of this small northern Utah town. By the time the ambulance pulled up, just 8 minutes had passed. What they found inside looked, at least on the surface, like a medical tragedy. Before we dive in, hit like and subscribe for more gripping true crime documentaries. Don't forget the bell icon and tell me where you're watching from. It means a lot to see people worldwide standing for truth. Your support keeps these stories remembered. Let's start. A 39-year-old man lay motionless near the foot of his bed. His skin was cold, no pulse, no signs of life. Paramedics worked, desperately, doing everything within their power. But at 3:36 in the morning, he was officially pronounced dead. The room around him was undisturbed. No overturned furniture, no signs of conflict. The preliminary report pointed toward a cardiac event, something sudden, something no one could have predicted. Nobody standing in that room that night had any idea they were looking at a murder scene. Kamas is not the kind of place where violent crime takes root. With a population of roughly 2,500, it's the sort of community where neighbors wave from their driveways and church schedules shape the rhythm of the week. People leave their doors unlocked. They trust one another, and the family at the center of this story, the Richins family, was woven right into the fabric of that trust. Kouri Richins was a man people admired. He ran a thriving construction company that had built a solid reputation across the region. He was the kind of guy who showed up early, worked hard, and kept his word. Ask anyone who knew him, and they'd tell you the same thing. Kouri was dependable, principled, the kind of man you could call at midnight and he'd answer. His wife, Kouri, had carved out her own name in the competitive world of luxury real estate. Operating under the banner of Kouri Richins Realty, she sold high-end properties in Park City with a sharp instinct for the market and an even sharper social media presence. Together, they looked like they had figured it out. A beautiful home, 3 young boys, financial success, and deep community roots. The kind of couple that other people quietly envied. But behind the image that they worked so carefully to maintain, something had been rotting for a long time. Secrets had piled up quietly, one on top of another, sealed behind closed doors. And now, with Kouri dead and questions beginning to surface, those doors were about to be forced open. Kouri Richins grew up in Bountiful, Utah. Born in 1982 to Gene and Linda Richins, he was raised on a family ranch where idle hands weren't tolerated. From childhood, he understood what it meant to earn something, to put in the work before expecting a reward. That upbringing shaped everything about him. He studied construction management and business at the University of Utah, and when he graduated, he didn't go looking for a desk at someone else's company. He built his own. His specialty was stonework, and his attention to detail set his firm apart. Clients trusted him because he didn't just manage projects from the office. He was right there on the site, sleeves rolled up, making sure things were done right. Beyond his business life, Kouri found freedom in the wilderness. Hunting was more than a hobby for him. It was a passion that took him across borders, from the forests of Canada to the plains of Mexico, and even the open stretches of Africa. Trophies from those expeditions decorated the walls of his office, each one a story he'd tell with pride. People who worked alongside him used words like loyal and steady. He was someone you wanted in your corner. But Kouri had also known real grief. In 2011, he lost his first wife, Julie, in a car accident that shattered his world. The loss drove him inward. He buried himself in work, kept people at arm's length, and spent years trying to find solid ground again. It took 2 years before he let someone back in. That someone was Kouri Darden, ambitious, driven, and arriving with a background that spanned healthcare and human resources before she pivoted entirely into real estate. The two married in 2013, and their family grew quickly. Kouri adored his boys. No matter what was happening at work, dinner at home was non-negotiable. He believed in structure, in being present, in building something that would last beyond him. But the woman he had built that life with was operating by an entirely different set of rules. and it would only be a matter of time before those differences cracked everything apart. Kouri had never been content with a modest trajectory. Even before real estate, she had launched a cleaning business, always searching for the next income stream, the next opportunity. When she shifted focus to luxury properties in Park City, she threw herself into it completely. Her agency grew, her profile rose, and her social feeds became a curated gallery of gorgeous homes and apparent success. But behind the polished presentation was a financial reality that looked nothing like what she projected online. Kouri was comfortable with risk in a way that made Eric deeply uneasy. She was willing to borrow aggressively, bet boldly, and worry about the consequences later. Eric was the opposite. Methodical, cautious, and almost allergic to debt. That fundamental incompatibility slowly poisoned their marriage. The tension escalated dramatically when Eric began digging into their finances and discovered something that stopped him cold. Without his knowledge or consent, more than $200,000 had vanished from their joint accounts. Large loans had been taken out against their home, again, without him knowing. For a man who prided himself on order and transparency, the realization that someone he'd trusted completely had been systematically deceiving him was devastating. Things came to a head when Kouri pushed hard to purchase a $2 million Park City mansion. Eric refused. He could see exactly where that road led. His refusal wasn't just about the house. It was the moment he drew a line, and it marked the beginning of the end of whatever was left of their marriage. As 2021 drew to a close, the relationship had deteriorated past the point of repair, and then came the incidents. Strange, alarming, deeply unsettling moments that Eric began to connect into a pattern. During a vacation in Greece, Eric became severely ill after consuming something Kouri had prepared for him. He was overcome with nausea and weakness. Doctors at the time attributed it to food poisoning, but Eric didn't buy it. He came home quieter, more watchful, more afraid. Then came Valentine's Day, 2022. Kouri made him a sandwich. Almost immediately after taking a bite, Eric noticed he couldn't feel his extremities. His breathing grew labored. In a stroke of fortune that likely spared his life, he had an epinephrine injector on him, a necessity due to severe allergies, and he used it. That moment crystallized everything. Eric reached out to his sister and his business partner and told them directly what he believed was happening. He was convinced Kouri was trying to kill him. Yet he made an agonizing choice. He didn't go to the police. His sons were at the center of that decision. He couldn't bring himself to shatter their world any more than it had already been fractured. What he did instead was act quietly. He rewrote his will, stripping Kouri of all inheritance rights. He updated every life insurance policy to exclude her. He revoked the power of attorney she had held over his accounts. He was preparing for a separation, doing it carefully, doing it slowly, but he never got the chance to finish. In the final weeks of his life, Eric seemed diminished. Close friends noticed it. He avoided future conversations. He pulled back emotionally. He was still there every night for his boys, still going through the motions, but something fundamental had gone dim behind his eyes. March 3rd, 2022, a Thursday, began without any visible signs of what the night would bring. That evening, Kouri told people in their social circle that they were marking the acquisition of a new Park City home, that same $2 million property Eric had so firmly opposed. She claimed the night was quiet and intimate, that she'd fixed Eric his favorite drink, a Moscow Mule, and that the two had talked casually about business and family while their sons slept upstairs. At some point, according to her account, one of the boys woke from a nightmare. She went to comfort him and, she said, accidentally drifted off to sleep in his room. Around 3 a.m, she woke, walked back to the master bedroom, and found Eric collapsed on the floor. She called for help. Paramedics came, but Eric was already gone. Her composure in the hours that followed was striking. She was measured, consistent, and grieving in all the ways people expected a widow to grieve. Investigators had no immediate reason to look beyond the surface. That changed when the medical examiner's findings landed on their desks. Kouri Richins had not died of heart failure. His autopsy revealed a concentration of fentanyl in his bloodstream that exceeded the lethal threshold by a factor of 5. Fentanyl, A synthetic opioid dramatically more potent than morphine had been used in clinical settings for severe pain management, but the substance found in Eric's body bore none of the markers of a pharmaceutical prescription. Forensic chemists determined it was street manufactured, illicitly produced, and introduced into his system orally. Everything pointed toward something mixed into a drink. The timeline was chilling. The effects would have set in within minutes of ingestion, silently shutting down his respiratory system while he lay in his own bed, unable to call for help. With the cause of death now officially classified as acute fentanyl toxicity, detectives built out a full portrait of Eric's life. What they found was consistent. A man in excellent health, no history of substance use, no prescriptions that could explain what was in his blood. The accidental overdose theory was dead. Now they had a murder investigation, though publicly. Kouri was still cast in the role of grieving widow, preparing to collect on substantial life insurance policies while accepting condolences from the community that had long admired her family. What investigators uncovered next came through the quiet, relentless work of digital forensics. Kouri had claimed she was asleep during the critical hours of that night. Her phone said otherwise. Device logs showed her phone had been unlocked more than 10 times between midnight and 3 in the morning, the very window during which Eric is believed to have lost consciousness. During those same hours, she had been sending and permanently deleting messages. Forensic recovery tools pulled fragments of those communications from backup data, and what emerged was deeply incriminating. Among the recovered exchanges were messages between Kouri and a contact identified as CL, a woman with connections that extended into criminal circles. Their conversation thread stretched back to late 2021. In the beginning, Kouri's requests were framed vaguely, referencing something that could help manage pain for an investor, but the language quickly evolved. She began using coded references, including the phrase Michael Jackson stuff, a slang term associated with powerful opioids, fentanyl among them. Financial records provided the receipts. 2 separate $900 payments had been transferred from Kouri's personal account to this contact, one in December, another in mid-February, just days before the Valentine's Day incident. Under questioning, CL acknowledged providing pills and powder, though she maintained she had no awareness of their intended purpose. When investigators mapped each financial transaction against the timeline of Eric's health crises, the alignment was impossible to dismiss as coincidence. The first payment preceded his illness in Greece. The second came just before the sandwich incident on Valentine's Day. And a third purchase, they discovered, had occurred in the days immediately before Eric's death. The net was tightening, but the evidence didn't stop there. The morning after Eric died, before the body had even been formally processed, Kouri phoned a locksmith and demanded access to the family's home safe. The technician who arrived later described her as frantic, constantly pushing him to move faster. What she couldn't have known was that Eric had recently changed the combination himself, locking her out deliberately. The safe yielded nothing she was looking for. Within days of his death, Kouri pressed forward on the $2 million Park City property, the same purchase Eric had refused to authorize, placing the deed in her name alone and listing the home for resale at $3.7 million weeks later. And then there was her search history. Despite attempts to wipe her browser activity, forensic analysts were able to reconstruct key queries from her device. In the days leading up to March 4th, Kouri had searched for the precise dosage at which fentanyl becomes fatal, what the signs of an overdose would appear as to others nearby, and whether toxicology tests could still detect poison in a body following cremation. Those searches were not the searches of a grieving wife. They were the searches of someone planning. 1 year after Eric's death, Kouri Richins stepped back into the public eye, not from a courtroom, but from a television studio. She had written a children's book titled Are You With Me?, a story about a young boy processing the loss of his father. Morning shows welcomed her warmly. She spoke with quiet authority about grief and recovery, introducing audiences to what she called the 3 C's: connection, continuity, and care. She was received as an inspiration, a mother who had transformed personal devastation into something healing and meaningful. The book launched on March 5th, deliberately positioned 1 day after the anniversary of Eric's death. It gained traction quickly. Readers were moved. Reviews were kind. Except that Kouri hadn't written a word of it. Investigators discovered she had contracted a ghostwriting service, Book Writing Lane, using only a rough personal outline as the basis. Her glowing testimonial about the company's services was still publicly visible on their website. While she gave interviews about honoring lost loved ones, law enforcement was quietly completing the final stages of building a case against her. The contrast was almost surreal. A woman being celebrated as a voice for grief was on the verge of being charged with orchestrating the very death she claimed to be healing from. By May of 2023, prosecutors had assembled an airtight case file. They had the supplier who confirmed providing the substance. They had financial records tracing every payment. They had toxicology data confirming the cause and method of death. They had the digital reconstruction of her movements and communications on the night Eric died. They had evidence of insurance fraud, unauthorized withdrawals, and deliberate attempts to alter legal documents benefiting Eric's rightful heirs. Everything interlocked with precision. On May 8, 2023, Kouri Richins was arrested at her Kamas home and formally charged with first-degree murder, fraud, and falsification of official documents. The arrest landed like a shockwave through the community. People who had sat beside her at memorial services, who had watched her on television and felt admiration for her strength, were now confronting something far more difficult. At her initial court appearance, her legal team sought bail. The judge denied it without hesitation, citing both the severity of the charges and the risk that she would flee. She was remanded to the county jail to await trial. The media coverage that followed was a study in contradiction. Photographs of her in soft-tone professional attire, beside footage of her seated stone-faced in an orange jumpsuit, expression unreadable, saying nothing. The defense pushed back, arguing the prosecution's case rested on circumstantial threads that had been stitched together too conveniently. But the threads weren't thin, and they didn't unravel under scrutiny. Prosecutors continued releasing new layers of evidence as the legal proceedings moved forward. The court agreed she represented a danger to the community and refused to revisit the bail decision. She has remained incarcerated ever since. What was left behind goes far beyond a legal case. Eric's construction company, which he had built from the ground up with his own hands, quietly collapsed. The home on Willow Court is gone. His 3 sons are being raised by other family members, growing up without their father, separated from the life they once knew. The children's book that Kouri hoped would launch a new chapter of her public identity has been pulled from every platform and erased from retailers entirely. In Kamas, the Richins name now carries a weight that no one in that town ever imagined it would. The case has become a kind of cautionary emblem, proof that appearances can be engineered, that deception can live comfortably inside a beautifully ordinary life for years before it surfaces. The trial has not yet concluded. A jury will ultimately deliver the verdict, but the story of what happened on Willow Court, behind the locked doors of a home that looked from every angle like everything was fine, has already changed that quiet Utah town in ways that won't easily be undone. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. Your time, your attention, and your constant support truly mean more than words can explain. This channel continues to grow because of viewers like you who engage, share their thoughts, and believe in spreading awareness. If you found this video meaningful, take a moment to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upcoming upload. And don't forget to leave a comment. I genuinely read them. And your opinions, perspectives, and discussions make this community stronger. Most importantly, beyond everything you watch here, remember to prioritize your safety in real life. Stay aware of your surroundings, trust your instincts without hesitation, and never ignore small warning signs. Awareness and caution can protect you and the people around you. Share important conversations with your loved ones, look out for one another, and always choose safety first. Thank you once again for your continued support. Stay safe, stay alert, stay prepared, and I'll see you in the next video.